the worst part wasn't the sound. It was the sound stopping. It was the moment that guttural, inhuman, clicking sound. The one that had been echoing from the canyons suddenly stopped and was replaced by something else entirely. Something familiar, an imitation of my wife's voice, clear as day, calling my name from the darkness. It wasn't perfect, it was just enough to freeze the blood in my veins. The cadence was wrong, the tone was just a shade too high, but the terror was in the intent. It knew my name, and it wanted me to think it was her. My name is Marc, and I'm a geologist. Or I was. I'm a man of science, of rocks and strata, of predictable forces and measurable data. I spent my summers doing fieldwork in the vast, silent stretches of the American Southwest, specifically a remote, desolate region bordering the Navajo Nation. It's a beautiful place, deep red canyons, mesas that catch fire at sunrise, and an endless, humbling sky. I always respected the land, the isolation, and the stories that came with it. I'd heard the hushed conversations about the things that walk at night, the ancient warnings. I always filed them away as fascinating folklore, the colorful mythology of a resilient culture. I was a practical man. I believed in what I could see and touch. That was my baseline, my safe and solid ground, and that's what made the ground open up beneath me. It started subtly, as these things always do. My first clue should have been the stillness, not the absence of sound, but the wrongness of it. One afternoon, I was hiking back to my truck, navigating a series of dusty arroyos, when I came across a dead coyote. Now, seeing a carcass isn't unusual out there, but the way this one was arranged was, it was splayed out, limbs bent at impossible angles, as if something had tried to turn it inside out. Its face was frozen in a silent scream, and there were no obvious puncture wounds, no signs of a struggle. Just this profound, disturbing stillness. I remember feeling a prickle on the back of my neck, but I dismissed it as the heat in my imagination. The next day, the sounds began, faint at first, like the wind playing tricks, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper on the breeze, a series of quick footsteps that sounded like they were pacing my own, just out of sight, behind a rocky outcrop. I'd stop and listen, but the moment I did, everything would fall silent, just the hum of the heat and the distant call of a hawk. My rational mind attributed it to echoes, to the unique acoustics of the canyons. The sun baked everything, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But the tricks grew more personal. I started seeing things in my periphery, a shadow, long and thin, that would dart behind a boulder the second I turned my head, a flash of movement on a distant ridge that didn't belong to a big-horned sheep. I started camping closer to my truck, just in case. The paranoia became a steady hum beneath my thoughts. Then came the scratching. One night, a few days into my trip, I was lying in my tent, half asleep, when I heard it. A faint, deliberate scraping sound on the outside of my tent flap. My heart hammered. I froze, holding my breath. It wasn't the sound of an animal looking for food. This was a patient, rhythmic drag of something sharp against the nylon. Slowly, I reached for my flashlight. The scratching stopped the moment I grabbed it. My fingers fumbled with the switch, and I shot the beam out the side of the tent. Nothing, just the vast, empty night. I scanned the area, but the light only illuminated dust and scrub brush. The moment I turned it off, the scratching returned, this time on the opposite side of the tent, a lower, more guttural sound that seemed to be digging into the earth itself, right where my head was. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my sleeping bag, listening to the sounds of something circling me, waiting. It was no longer the wilderness I knew. It was something else, something with purpose, something that was toying with me. The last morning I was there, I woke up with the sun. Exhausted and shaken, I packed up my gear, my hands trembling. I was done. I was going home. I got in my truck, turned the key, and nothing happened. The engine cranked, but it wouldn't catch. My breath hitched in my throat. I popped the hood and saw that a key electrical wire had been cleanly, expertly snipped. I don't carry wire cutters. I don't know who would. As I stood there, a cold wave of dread washed over me. I wasn't just being watched. I was being held. I looked up at the surrounding mesas, and that's when I heard it. The clicks and whistles, the impossible bending of my own name on the wind. A sound that was too complex to be human, and yet it was there. And then it stopped, and the imitation of my wife's voice started. I didn't try to fix the truck. I just got back in and locked the doors. The feeling of utter, profound helplessness consuming me. I didn't know what to do, how to survive the coming night. I just knew I was bait, and the line had just gone taut, as twilight bled into a black, star-strewn night. I saw it. It didn't walk. It shambled, a long, unnaturally thin silhouette, moving over the rocky terrain with a jerky, almost broken grace. It was impossibly tall, and its limbs seemed to bend the wrong way. I couldn't make out a face in the dim light of the moon, only the glint of what might have been eyes. It was getting closer. The guttural clicking returned, a rapid, wet sound that was now punctuated with distorted, garbled echoes of my own voice, of my wife's, of the sounds I'd been hearing all week. It reached the truck and stopped, a few feet from my driver's side window. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then, it leaned forward. It placed a long, clawed hand on the glass, just inches from my face. I could see the vague shape of a palm, but the fingers were too long, too spindly, ending in black, razor-sharp talons. I saw the faint, sickly yellow glow of its eyes through the shroud of darkness that was its face. The terror was a physical force, pinning me to the seat. I fumbled for my keys in a blind panic, my hand shaking so violently I dropped them. I picked them up, shoved the key into the ignition, and with a desperate guttural cry, I twisted it. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, lurching forward, not daring to look back in the rearview mirror. I drove blindly, headlights cutting a swath through the night, until I saw the blessed lonely lights of a gas station on the highway. I never went back. I sold my truck, quit my job. I couldn't bear to be alone in the dark anymore. Couldn't stand the sound of a distant dog barking or a crow cawing without wondering if it was just an imitation. The memory of that thing, the way it moved, the way it knew my name, is a heavy, suffocating weight I'll carry forever. I'm safe now, in a city full of people, but I know it's out there, somewhere, in the empty places, and every so often, when the wind blows just right, I think I can hear my name on the breeze. Just a little too high, just a little too wrong. It didn't just imitate, it replaced. The thing that came back to the ranch that night, walking on two legs like my father. It wore his clothes and made his sounds, but it wasn't him. The truth was, I wasn't even sure where the real him was anymore. The real horror of what happened to my family isn't the moment I came face to face with the thing, but the slow, agonizing realization that for days, maybe even weeks, I had been living with a monster wearing the face of the man who raised me. The deep, gnawing dread was the fact that it took me so long to notice. Our family ranch was an isolated place, nestled deep in the arid, rolling hills of Utah, miles from the nearest paved road. My name is Liam. I grew up with my parents, Sarah and Bill, on that land, a life of hard work, long days, and the comforting predictability of the seasons. We were a close-knit unit, relying on each other for everything. The sounds of our home were a part of the family. My dad's hearty laugh after a long day, the low, steady murmur of my mother's humming as she worked in the kitchen, the familiar mewling of Old Man Tom, our ancient one-eyed barn cat. The world was vast and empty beyond our fences. but inside, it was warm and safe. It was this baseline of normalcy, this foundation of trust and familiarity, that made the cracks so subtle at first, and the eventual collapse so complete and devastating. The first hint of something being wrong was with old man Tom. He had been with us for so long he was practically a member of the family, a grizzled old tomcat with a single, knowing eye. One evening, he didn't come back from his evening patrol. My mom was upset, but we figured it was just a circle of life. The coyotes were always hungry. A few days later, a cat that looked exactly like him was sitting on the porch. The same matted gray fur, the same one-eyed stare, the same curled tail. He looked identical, but he wasn't. He was quiet, terribly, unsettlingly quiet. He never meowed, never purred. When you petted him, he would just sit there, a silent, unmoving statue, his good eye watching you with a chilling stillness that made my skin crawl. He'd follow me from room to room, not for a treat or a scratch, but just to watch. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but it was there, and it was deeply, fundamentally wrong. After the cat, the animals started acting up. Our herd of cattle, usually placid and predictable, became skittish. They would stampede for no reason, huddling together against the fences as if a predator were on the prowl. But there was never anything there. Then, one night, the air was torn by the bellow of our prize bull. A sound of such profound and visceral distress it felt like the earth itself was crying out in pain. My father, Bill, grabbed his rifle and rushed out. He was gone for a long time. When he finally came back, he was pale, his hands shaking slightly. "Just a coyote spooking them," he said, his voice a little too flat. "All's good now," but everything wasn't good. The bellowing was the first time the thing had truly exposed its hand, and it would not be the last. Slowly, insidiously, my father started to change. It began with little things. He would answer a question a second too late, as if the words were being translated in his mind. He'd forget things he knew by heart, like the combination to the feed shed lock. His laugh, the one I had known all my life, was now an empty, hollow sound, a mimicry that had the cadence, but none of the genuine warmth. His eyes, the kind, crinkling eyes of a man who loved his family and his land, became vacant, lifeless. My mother started to notice it too. I'd catch her looking at him with a worried, questioning expression, a look that said, "Who is this man?" We never spoke about it though. The thought was too terrifying to put into words. The unraveling came on a moonless night. I was working on my truck, and my dad was supposed to be checking on the fences on the north end of the property. My mom was inside. Suddenly, I heard her voice, panicked and terrified, calling out for my father from the deep shadows of the northern field. "Bill, where are you? Bill, please." My heart leaped into my throat. I ran in that direction, screaming her name. "Mom, where are you?" I called out, my voice strained with fear. Then, the voice came again, but this time, it was from the south. The sound was distorted, as if coming from a broken speaker, and it was mocking, "Bill, Bill." The sound was perfect in its imitation, a flawless copy of my mother's terror, but the location was impossible. That's when the memory of the bull hit me, the bellowing that was not just a sound of distress, but a performance of it. The realization crashed into me with the force of a physical blow. The thing that came back with my father's face was not him. My real parents were gone. One of the things was now in the house, and another was out there. Toying with me, I ran back to the house, but as I reached the door, it opened. The silhouette of my father stood there, a shadow in the doorway. "Liam, what's wrong?" it said, in a voice that was perfectly, chillingly his. I slammed the door shut and bolted from my room, locking the door and barricading it with the old dresser. I could hear it outside, the padding of its feet, the slow, deliberate turning of the doorknob. Then it began to speak, its voice a low, soothing plea. "Liam, son, What's going on? Come out. We're worried about you. It was the voice of a loving father, a perfect, agonizing imitation. Then the voice changed, dropping into a deep, guttural growl. Its words a threat. Don't you want to see your mother again, Liam? At the same time, I heard a frantic tapping sound at the window. I turned and saw the one-eyed cat staring in, its eye glowing with a malevolent, sickly yellow light. Its mouth was open, and a low, guttural, chittering sound. The sound that had begun to haunt my thoughts was coming from deep within its chest. I realized then that they were everywhere. They had me surrounded. With a primal scream of terror, I grabbed a chair, smashed the window, and scrambled out into the night, the shattered glass falling to the ground like a death knell. I didn't stop running. I never looked back. I ran blindly through the dark, the sounds of my family's voices, the twisted, mocking echoes, following me on the wind. I didn't stop until I reached the highway and the lone, welcome lights of my nearest neighbor's house, miles away. They found me there, a broken, terrified wreck. The ranch was investigated, but nothing was ever found, just an empty house and the silence. The mystery remains unsolved. I never found out what happened to my parents. The ranch is an empty shell, a monument to a perfect replacement. I live in a different state now, in a city with millions of people, but I still jump at shadows. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I hear a faint, distant meow, and I wonder if it's truly just a stray cat, or if the thing with one eye is still out there, waiting for me to be alone again. The woods are full of sounds, and I've learned to read every one. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, a distant bird call. They all tell a story. They tell you what's near, what's far, what's hiding, and what's moving. But the sounds I heard that night, the ones I've been hearing ever since, they don't tell a story. They tell a lie. They are a weapon wielded by something ancient and patient. Something that hunts with the voices of its victims. Something that knows the wilderness better than any man. My name is Ben, and for 15 years, I was a park ranger in one of the most remote national parks in the country. I was a man who found solace in the deep woods, a man who believed in a natural order. I've dealt with everything from lost hikers and rogue bears to forest fires and flash floods. I was a professional. A skeptic who trusted his training and his gut. I never believed in the ghost stories told around campfires or the whispers about ancient curses. The mountain I patrolled was a wild and beautiful place, but it was just that, a mountain. And the mysterious disappearances that had been plaguing the park for a few years, I wrote them off as tragic accidents, the inevitable price of underestimating the wilderness. I figured the hikers were getting lost, falling, or succumbing to the elements. They were unprepared, and the park was a powerful teacher. But I was about to learn that the park itself was not the teacher. It was a hunting ground, and there was a master predator at work. The first clue was a campsite. I was on a solo patrol deep in the backcountry when I came across it. It was completely abandoned, but not in the way a campsite is left when people pack up and leave. The gear was all there. A half-burned log in the fire pit, 2 backpacks leaning against a tree, a can of beans still sitting on a portable stove, but the tent was shredded, ripped open from the inside, as if something had burst through the fabric in a blind panic. And then there were the tracks. Around the tent, I found a series of prints that sent a shiver down my spine. They were large, almost human in shape, but with a pronounced heel pad and long, clawed toes. They were also spaced unnaturally far apart, suggesting a powerful loping stride. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a mountain lion. It was something else. My radio crackled to life with a garbled report of a missing couple, last seen in this area. A cold certainty settled in my gut. They hadn't gotten lost. They had been taken. After that, the sounds began. It started with a low, mournful wail, a sound I initially dismissed as the wind. But then I heard it more clearly. The sound of a baby crying. It was coming from a rocky gorge, a few hundred yards away. The sound a mix of heart-wrenching distress and a strange, synthetic quality, like a distorted recording. I was a trained rescuer. I had to investigate. I scrambled down into the gorge, calling out, but the crying stopped the moment I entered. All I found was silence. A few days later, while on a different patrol, I heard a woman's scream, a hyped, desperate sound that seemed to echo from the next ridge over. Again, I went running, my heart pounding with adrenaline, but when I got to the top of the ridge, the sound was gone. I spent the next few weeks chasing these ghosts, the cries of a baby, the panicked calls for help, the desperate screams of a woman. They always led me deeper into the woods, just a little farther, just a little more isolated, before vanishing without a trace. My rational mind was trying to find an explanation, a prankster with a sound machine, an echo effect from the canyons, exhaustion playing tricks on my ears. But my gut, the part of me that had trusted the wilderness my entire life, was telling me a different story. Then, the lies became more personal. My patrol partner Dave was one of my closest friends. We'd worked together for years. We had our own little jokes, our own shorthand. One evening, as I was sitting by my campfire outside my remote ranger cabin, I heard a voice call out from the woods, "Ben, hey, Ben." It was Dave. The voice was so perfect, so spot on, I instinctively stood up, ready to greet him. But then the voice continued, "Ben, help me, Ben." The urgency was right, but the words were wrong. Dave would never have called out to me like that. He would have used our code, a specific sequence of whistles, to let me know he was there. This was a panicked, desperate lure. My blood ran cold as I realized what I had been doing for weeks. The crying baby, the screaming woman, they weren't just sounds. They were bait. Lures designed to make me, a trained professional, break protocol and abandon my position. I was a man of the woods, and something in the woods had learned how to hunt me. It had learned to use the very things that made me a rescuer against me, preying on my need to help, on my humanity. I spent the rest of that night in a state of profound, bone-deep terror. I was back at my cabin, the only semblance of safety I had, but I knew I was far from safe. The sun began to set, casting long, menacing shadows across the clearings, and the sounds began again. But this time, they weren't distant. They were all around me. The baby's cry, the woman's scream, the distorted call of my partner's voice. They were a cacophony, a swirling symphony of horror coming from the trees surrounding the cabin. I was a man under siege. The sounds were so real, so terrifyingly close, that I had to cover my ears, trembling uncontrollably. Then, all the sounds stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying, and I heard it. A new sound, the crunch of heavy, deliberate footsteps. They were walking on two legs, but the gait was wrong. A loping, unnatural rhythm that was too low to the ground. The footsteps stopped right outside my cabin door. I froze. I slowly, shakily, moved to the small window on the side of the cabin and peered out. Standing there, just feet from my door, was a tall, thin silhouette. It was impossibly thin, covered in matted, dark fur that was almost black in the low light. Its head was bent at a strange, unnatural angle. I knew then that it wasn't a bear or a coyote. It was the thing that left those tracks. I watched in paralyzed horror as it slowly turned its head, and I saw two glowing, sickly yellow eyes staring directly at me through the window. Then, a single sound, a low, guttural growl, a perfect parody of a human sound of profound hatred, came from outside my door. It was a sound that told me I had been found. I managed to scramble into a small, reinforced supply closet, barricading the door and waiting out the night in a state of sheer, unadulterated terror. The next morning, A search party found me, a shell-shocked wreck, babbling incoherently. I never went back to the park. I quit my job and moved to a small town far from the mountains. I can't bring myself to listen to bird calls or distant screams anymore without wondering if they're real, or if they're just another one of the lies, the lure of a patient predator. I escaped, but the knowledge that something ancient and malevolent is out there, hunting with the sounds of the things you love, is a burden I will carry for the rest of my life.